Ladies and gentlemen, welcome at the discussion round table about the city train. How does rail transport develop cities? Good afternoon, dear participants of the discussion. Let me introduce myself. I am Alexey Romanenko, Partner Head of Infrastructure and Transport, KPMG in Russia. Let me introduce speakers of today's discussion session. Toni, Deputy Managing Director, Head of the Development Center at St. Petersburg Transport Hubs, Russian Railways. Alexey Yurievich Belyankin, Head of the Center for Corporate Governance of the Suburban Complex, Russian Railways. Alexander Loshmanov, Deputy CEO for Passenger Transport Development, Transmashholding. Viktor Lesh, Director General, Sinara Transport Machines. Vyacheslav Nevezhin, Deputy Minister of Transport and Road System of the Novosibirsk region. And Vadim Izotov, Senior Vice President, VTB Bank. Dear colleagues, today's session is called City Train. How does rail transport develop cities? In other words, why do we pay so much attention to city trains today? Because it's a highly technology-intensive, innovative mode. And when we speak about city trains in the conventional meaning, then we perhaps associate it more with something slow, not quite efficient, and not much linked to new technologies. But let us see how this project was realized in Moscow, in other parts of the country, and you will see how much city trains today have become the important element of the urban landscape. But the development of this mode is also much more fundamental than we might imagine it today. And let me present you a small video so that to start our discussion with the vision of possible development. Experts share a common opinion that by the year 2030, the public mobility pattern, particularly in major cities, will be critically different from today's model. Thanks to seamless multimodal transport system, the passengers will be able to travel from destination A to destination B by more cost-effective, eco-friendly and safe transport means. Let's take a look into the future together. Instead of paying separately for the tickets, fuel duties, transport cards, the passengers will buy a complex mobility package that will incorporate the desired mix of services, and this will benefit both the service providers in terms of their higher revenues, but also passengers who will travel by new means and models to more destinations in much less time. This new mobility mode will encourage the wider public loyalty to public transport. Due to the mix of different transport modes in the service package, ownership of private cars will be of practically no use, and the driving license will not be needed any longer. The service providers will incorporate and benefit each other's revenue growth, for example, through the new opportunities for generation of profits, through the new technology of kinetic power of vehicles and its conversion into electricity, or through compensation of the peak period's energy demand from the energy banks in the electric cars. The high-speed railway network connecting cities into a larger unified community will become the backbone of the metropolitan agglomeration transport system. A distance covered in 4 hours today by private car will be covered in 30 minutes by a high-speed train, and even these 30 minutes will be spent in a more meaningful way thanks to the passengers' personalized digital services of working space and allowing passengers will giving a chance to prepare for the forthcoming business meetings or take a rest or just take a breath of purified air. Of course, this is only one of the possible scenarios, one of the groundbreaking changes. As the demand for products and services is growing with a focus on mobility, privacy, and connectivity, by the year 2030, a new segment of services will be available with its gross value exceeding, well, $3 trillion. And what will mobility ecosystem look like? We believe it will be based on a substantial dialogue, the highest efficiency cooperation between businesses and public authorities, as well as proactive thinking of all stakeholders. Will B2C insurance disappear? How will the energy companies' business models change? What data highways and cybersecurity will be needed? What policies should governments put in place in the new ecosystem? A new bright future is ahead of us, but we'll have to get our large-scale endeavors completed before then, so that, to be sure, the future is rewarding and enjoyable. Thank you very much. As you saw in this video, the future prospects are really bright, but in a way we can say that we already live in this future. And one of the examples of this breakthrough high technology transport is the city train of the new generation, the distance covered, intermodality involved, the conveniences available. So they are reality, and they used to be unthinkable, even in Moscow. And I'm giving the first question to Oleg Toni. Please, will you tell us about realization of this project and its main advantages and benefits for Moscow after the project has been realized and its possible realization in other places too? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Indeed, speaking generally about city transport, railways is a unique tool for creating seamless transport infrastructure inside a city, because they have rails. You can launch any type of train there, but of course passenger trains in the city first of all. Railway transport is energy efficient, environmentally friendly compared to other means of transport like underground. Constructing new railways, even inside the city, is much cheaper. That's why several years ago, together with the government of the Russian Federation and the government of Moscow, started implementing an integrated project. Back then it was called Moscow's Transport Hub. Now it is called the Central Transport Hub, because when this project started in 2012-2013, its boundaries were smaller, and now have fast city trains running down to Tver. For us, it is important to have good passenger services, especially in such a large city as Moscow and the Moscow region. Now we see the financial indicators of the project and who approved it and who invested what into this project. It is clear that there was a discussion whether people will like it and use it or not. But now we understand that this service is in demand, and trains are running around the loop with an interval of 5 to 6 minutes, and every day we transport 500,000 passengers. Why is it so successful? We agreed with the city that the city transport is supplying passengers. So the task of other means of transport is to deliver people to our hubs. We have convenient hubs with underground And the platforms, and to put that simply, are located within 2 kilometers from one another. So it's very close to the neighboring houses. All of that is adapted for people with a disability, and all of that is equipped with the newest transport safety and security systems. It is convenient and comfortable, and the platforms have roofs, so in rainy or snowy weather people feel good there. That's why people use it a lot, and in the slide we had records of 562,000 passengers per day. And of course this project is continuing to grow. Moscow includes 2 railway loops, and the greater loop is mostly for cargo, and the smaller loop is now for passengers. It was very important to make it comfortable and convenient for the passengers, and from the logistics standpoint this should have been a new service. If you want to go to the central station, you have this possibility. If you don't need to go there, you can take this Moscow Central loop and choose your direction. So we unloaded central stations. They became less noisy, so more comfortable. We unloaded central lines of underground, where it became more comfortable for the passengers and guests of the city of Moscow. Now we have integration performed in 7 radial lines. So as soon as we open a hub, like in 10 days, passenger flow changes dramatically, and it is really so. And if several years ago we were discussing theory and practice, now we see that indeed it is so. And our aim is to fully integrate all of those areas and directions in the nearest perspective. So what is the nearest perspective? These are central Moscow diameters. Working with the radial lines, working with a loop, we understood how important this service is for the passengers. We need to improve the quality of this service, and now we are trying to launch Moscow central diameters. The point is that you are in one part of Moscow and you are being transported to another part of Moscow through the center, but you don't get into the center. So there also you can change to the underground, to other city transport, but you can continue with the Moscow central diameter. And you can use the Troika card, the transport card of Moscow, for paying for this service. And here we see time. It's just like underground, and they will start working from 5:30 a.m. till 1 a.m. and the first diameters will be launched from November next year. So Moscow Central Loop showed us that this technology is in demand, and from November the interval between trains will be 4 minutes, and basically Moscow Central Loop is underground train, just like underground. But for the moment we have no issues, and I'm sure that in November in peak hours we'll have 4-minute interval. And I should remind you that these projects were carried out in accordance with the May orders of President Putin. As for diameters, all trains, if we take Moscow central diameters and existing trains, the interval will be 5 to 6 minutes. Why is it convenient? People do not have to memorize the timetable, so whenever you come to the platform, in 2-3 minutes there will surely be a train arriving. this is very convenient, so you don't have to think about the train and its timetable. Service quality in the perspective in diameters will be just the same as in the central loop. This is Wi-Fi, toilets, barrier-free environment. So all of that to which we are used and which is now standard for Moscow central loop, in the perspective, all of that will be a standard for all diameters. This project is to be implemented from 2020 to 2024, so it's not something in the far future, but all of that will be in the nearest years to come. City infrastructure, railway infrastructure in Moscow starts expanding towards other cities like St. Petersburg and its region. First of all, a huge number of people, issues with traffic jams and other mass means of transport like underground, because in St. Petersburg it is even more expensive than in Moscow to construct. That's why the next project will be in St. Petersburg. So these are hubs in Moscow to be constructed. But speaking about St. Petersburg, the city development program, we looked at it and we saw the growth of cargo transportation to the Finnish Bay ports, the growth by 1.4 times, and also growth of passenger transportation. So speaking about St. Petersburg railway hub, we understand that St. Petersburg is a special city. It lies around the Finnish Bay. It's a historic city, and constructing something really new there is impossible. That's why the concept we are developing now provides for relocation of the transit flows outside the city, in the north and in the south, and then improve some peripheric roads. Thus, infrastructure inside the city will be unloaded for the city train. And if Moscow is a loop and radial lines, St. Petersburg are semicircles, semi-loops just around the bay. So these are regular trains to Tosno and other locations. So the idea is the same: unload the infrastructure and then launch the city train. The concept is now under development. It is yet a project, and the first options of this concept were considered by the government of St. Petersburg on the 2nd of September, and it was approved. And now we are in stage 2, where we consider the financial model, and I am sure that all of that will be implemented. Well, it will take a bit more time till 2030, but I'm sure that after implementing this project, St. Petersburg will become a completely different city from the standpoint of comfort and convenience. So it will be possible to take a train to the Pulkovo airport. So you will be able to avoid the risks of traffic jams and their unpredictability. 5 to 6 minutes intervals, those transport hubs, convenient interchanges. So it's a kind of copy-paste, but it has certain peculiarities related to the city. And I am sure that later on, other cities of our country will have something similar. That's it briefly. Thank you.
Спасибо большое, Олег Вильнянс.
Thank you very much, Mr. Toni. Indeed, from the point of view of an international experience, this is the unique project realized in the uniquely short period of time. For example, London project, which is called Crossrail, though it was to be realized by the year 2018. It is lagging behind the schedule. They have postponed it till 2020. So in fact, the scope of this project is the reason why the timelines are shifted. But the Moscow project is a good example showing that when the existing infrastructure is used and developed, accessibility of different districts can be improved within a very short period of time. And now I'm giving the floor to Alexey Belyankin, head of the Center for Corporate Governance of the Suburban Complex at Russian Railways. My question is about other regions, whether this experience, which we have just heard of, will be used and realized or just followed in other regions, and whether there are any complications or barriers in realization of similar projects. Please take the floor. Thank you very much for the question. Dear colleagues, dear friends, it's been for a long time that we've been discussing the issues faced by the suburban complex, and much has been done to improve it. And today we are working not just in a sustainable manner, but we are working on the advanced plans. As of today, we see that this scope does not compare with Moscow or St. Petersburg. Still, Krasnoyarsk is a good example because the city train there was launched successfully, and it served the purposes of transportation of guests of the universiade. And thanks to that project and experience, we extended this beyond the timelines of the project. So it is functioning very successfully, serving different cities where the potential exists for city trains. And the surplus in passengership is measured at the level of 75% of growth from today's volumes. As of today, the effect from the city and suburban trains is not fully appreciated or assessed. Just 3 years ago, the Analytical Center under the government of the Russian Federation, on the order of Ministry of Transport of Russia, designed the method of assessment of socio-economic effects of the suburban transport for the regions. And these effects, of course, are obvious, but this method features figures and formulas that guide us in how to assess and digitally model the development plans for the city trains and suburban transport. And after we implement this method and make all the computations of figures, then it will be a very good tool helping us to justify the infrastructure development, because the current infrastructure today is not quite ready. I mean, the capacity is not sufficient for such projects. Other limitations are in terms of investment, because we need to justify the economic effect, the profitability of projects, both for Russian railways and for other investors, and correspondingly the tariffs for passengers need to be more affordable. And one of the key limitations I should mention is associated with development in the cities, but hoping we have the guarantees that the region will not amend its order or requirements, and the public needs will remain as we have estimated them, so that the guarantees would be that the projects will be used and the financial support will be available. This method of assessment allows to estimate the parameters by which the quality of life will change in the region, the effect which we can expect for the urban environment development. The main thing is why city trains are given such a priority segment, because it provides for more comfort and convenience of passengers. And in future, this is going to be one single ticket system and one single operator. and the advanced, comfortable means of transportation in different modes of transport, and very convenient hubs and places to change trains or modes of transport, so that people would just very quickly and conveniently change trains and vehicles. In other words, we need to balance many things in our plans, and today we need, of course, to look for serious investment for all this, to cover all the operational and maintenance costs, because when we start construction, of course, this will reflect on the operational cost of Russian Railways Company, and we'll need to find investment and other funding instruments. And the payback of these investments will need to be guaranteed. So, of course, we are looking for solutions that are justified by public demand and corresponding orders or applications on behalf of the regions. So that's the main outline of the city train and suburban trains in the regions. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Alexey. As for tariffs mentioned already, modern passengers look for accessibility not only from the point of view of movement from A to B, but also seamless convenience of movement and intermodality that would provide many benefits. I'm giving the question to Vadim Izotov. What can VTB Bank offer from the point of view of new technologies, and how this can be used to simplify the travel experiences of passengers? Thank you very much for your question. In fact, we do see today the changing paradigm of the city mobility and how it is shifted towards a multi-mobility system. And we can see example of Moscow and Petersburg, where the system becomes the backbone for the entire passenger system. The railway system becomes the backbone for the transport system, and we have been aware of this since the time we started the single cards, passenger cards in Moscow, and also the tokens on smartphones. So now the mobility applications mobile applications on the telephones are widely used. You can just use it underground or in other modes of transport in a seamless manner. And in fact, we see that this single card is the single ticket or single key to many services, which allows us to pay conveniently for transfers, to make changes more quickly, and to change operators without any barriers. And municipalities are gaining, thanks to this, the opportunity of developing more complicated, more sophisticated transport systems, and the opportunity to manage the the passenger flows in a more efficient way. So as the Moscow Central diameters are launched, our card will become accessible, so will be accepted at more polygons, including the terminals on the trains, and this will allow to improve the mobility of people, not only inside of the city, but also in between cities. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And in continuation of the topic of comfort and convenience, many modes of transport, passenger transport that link big agglomerations use the city shaping transport technology, which is the transport that is the agents of change in megapolises. It erases the borderline between the megapolis and the surrounding areas. Thus, the city train and the suburban train become a very important element in the ecosystem of megapolises. And these trains, these cars that are going to run soon in Russia, they are much more advanced than that have been here recently. So the train called Volga, for example, has been recently designed especially for the purpose of convenience. And at Sherbenka, I had my hands-on experience of riding on such a train, and I have a question because of this to Alexander Loshmanov. Please tell us about this train.
Такой хороший.
Thank you for such a nice introduction of our train, and thanks for the question. Dear colleagues, friends, hello. I would like to actually start with a point that both in the video and in the presentations there were a lot of mentioning of the future and many things that were announced as something to happen in 2030 are already reflected in what we have today. And this means that we hear the passengers, we know the passengers, we study their needs, and we implement all of those needs in our products. During this session, first of all, I would like to say what it is, comfort and convenience for modern passengers, for city residents, and what motivates drivers to leave their cars and use city transport. Here, I would outline 4 key points. First of all, fast agglomeration growth, and this means that motorways are very loaded, and then secondly, also it was mentioned today that specific seamless infrastructure is being put in place, and the city train in this structure is one of key elements. Thirdly, it was already mentioned that it's being environmentally responsible, and according to the latest surveys, about 40% of Russians today think about what's going to happen to our cities and our planet in general. And fourthly, the last but not least, it is creating a comfortable, fast speed train, which is nice, and we want people to choose railway transport. And I think Volga is a successful and vibrant example of how these trends can be implemented in a single product. We've been developing this train specifically for the city environment, and then we upgraded it specifically for the Moscow Central diameters. And I would like to outline certain peculiarities of this train. First of all, fast acceleration, which is very important for the city environment, because any minute saved on the way, just like last week from the government of Moscow, we received information that 1 minute saved by the passenger eventually becomes 24 hours during a year, and our Volga train allows to accelerate fast and save up to 5 minutes. So mathematics is very simple. These are flexible trains and can have 5 to 12 carriages. So for any direction, we can transport as many passengers as needed in case of changes. So operator can always add or remove carriages. These trains are reliable and safe. We have passive safety and active digital safety system and digital diagnostics. So the train is monitoring a large volume of information. This is also CCTV and predictive diagnostics and all of the elements that guarantee safety and security of the passengers on our trains. But all of that are not very visible. All of those parameters are mostly for the operator to be seen. But what passengers see, that's design, first of all, and our train was designed together with a leading European design bureau, and it's beautiful, fashionable, modern, and complies with the Moscow transport style. One of the most important elements of the city train is its interior. Passengers in the city environment, especially in the large cities, they spend a lot of time on board the train, and according to the psychological surveys, people get kind of tired of this, which could become a social problem. This is why, while designing the interiors, we were guided by bionic design, which combines functionality, beauty, elements of nature. So the train is very light, beautiful, and it is moving smoothly. It has climate control and air purification system and adaptive light. So in the morning the light is brighter, and in the evening hours the lighting is decreased to become more relaxing. So for the people to get relaxed a bit after their work day. What's also important is that we have certain functional solutions on this train. There are such important points about saving time. And here we also try to implement such solutions that would allow to save even more time. That is, first of all, wide doors, and we have a wider area at the entrance. We have wider aisles between the seats. So all of those elements allow passengers not only to save time, but also have comfortable seating, even in peak hours. Also, an interesting feature of our train is that we have all the elements in place for the passengers to be online. Those who were in such a situation, you know how it is uncomfortable nowadays to be offline. So we provided lots of USB plugs and outlets, and they are everywhere across the carriage. We provide high-speed Wi-Fi, large number of screens with news and timetable, from which screens you can get all the information about your trip. Our train is for all categories of passengers. If you are a mother with a baby in a pram, you'll find a place to sit safely and comfortably. If you have a bike, for that we also have special places. So we also have areas for low mobility passengers, and the train is barrier free. So this train can satisfy all the passengers' needs. Finally, I would like to say that we continue studying our passengers and the trends. And today we have certain elements we would like to integrate, which passengers will see in the nearest future. These are new functional zones. First of all, that refers to areas for passengers with children. They will be themed areas. Also, we plan to create co-working areas. stations for powering bicycles and electric scooters. So we want to provide space for all kinds of passengers, and we have also mobile seats that can be folded during peak hours. We plan to further develop information technology. These are interactive screens, and we plan to use windows of the train as monitors for the news or for the timetables. And the train integrated into the city environment should be integrated with other means of transport. So all the information regarding other means of transport will be reflected in the screens on board the train. We were speaking about 2030 in the video, but actually future is very close because it's just a matter of a couple of years. Thank you very much, Alexander. I just recall that in Sherbenka, in the railway salon, I had a guest from the South Tokian Railway, and he shared his experience that in the railway stations of the Tokyo suburbs, they have supermarkets and kindergartens, so that people, when they go to work, they could drop their kid in the kindergarten and then continue to work and then pick up the kid from work. That's a crazy intermodality and convenience. So all of that was the initiative of the railways. They organized it as a project of improving the quality of life and making railways more comfortable. Continuing the topic of the rolling stock, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Lesh. So, do you see the city train as a priority product in your product line?
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you for this bridge from the previous presentations to mine, because I didn't know how to offer my messages related to the story of the childcare facilities next to the railway stations and so on. I think that it was just timely contribution into our discussion. I wanted to say that several years ago we used the experience of some major international cities and experience of well-known gurus in the topology of cities. We came to the conclusion that turned out to be very simple, that the product, whether it is a city train or suburban train or another means of transport, this is something which is a sort of an outdated notion. And what we are talking today and what we are thinking today about is nicely illustrated in the video, which was before our in the beginning of our session. It is about future, but speaking about present, once again, we do something that we have adopted from international experience. For example, the integration of our shareholders' ambition and our partner Siemens, their ambitions, and also the customer requirements, which formulated the task for us. As a result, through this integration, we came up with a new model and a new image of a modern city. And very quickly we transferred from development of our strategy into the tactical steps. And the city train as a term, as a definition, needs to be treated from the point of view of how we apply, how we use our trains, and understand it as the link between agglomeration and other entities, and we can say that today we have connected Barnaul and Novosibirsk and thus have extended the horizons of life for many residents of these cities. Much attention is given to transport concession design in mega cities with population exceeding 1 million citizens. Such projects should incorporate, as we understand, several core elements, some related to transport, but some other elements, and several areas which we define as Mobility 4.0 edition is something that we wish to apply so that the entire line of our products and Sinara trains in the city environment, but also the suburban regions, would continue to be a core link between centers of life, between industrial centers. Just like in Moscow, we see it that this is a very good reference today. Reference when we seek solutions for better efficiency of transport. As it's been said, so according to plan, 200,000 passengers a day was a target, and today it is exceeding 500,000. So last statistics in agglomerations have proved themselves to be very efficient and popular. And last year they carried 150 million passengers, and this is very important because this is an important element for the entire urban system. And without this, without city trains, it wouldn't be possible, because the city train is the backbone, the link, and the agent of mobility for residents inside and between cities. And just like in Moscow, this strategy should also be implemented in other parts of the country, driving force other changes, other upgraded quality elements. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And in continuation of what you have just said about the experience that needs to be disseminated in our regions across Russia, I'm giving the floor to Mr. Nevezhin, Deputy Minister of Transport and Road System of the Novosibirsk region. This is the region which is realizing a very big project linking Novosibirsk with other cities inside of the Novosibirsk Oblast region. Good afternoon. Let me, for the start, outline where and what we are like. So Novosibirsk is the third largest city in Russia with a population of 1.6 million citizens, and the population is growing, and the transport system has 5 directions of development, 75 train pairs, 175 stations, and of the entire passenger ridership, over 4.5 million passengers are inside of the city. These are the people commuting from one district to another in the morning and backwards home in the evening. Historically, the city stretches on the shores of the Ob river, and it is stretching along its banks. And the southern direction is one of the historically important routes for the city train, featuring 7.5 million passengers a year, which is 35% of the overall passenger ridership. Since recent time, we have improved the regular circulation of trains at regular intervals, and within this project called the Akademgorodok, the interval is from 15 to 20 minutes. Correspondingly, accessibility will improve in this direction. And in this regime, we have introduced some trains from more remote places, 100 or 120 kilometers away from the center of the city. But passengers don't mind it because some trains are speed trains and some stop at other stations. So the interval is from 15 to 20 minutes, and during the peak hours, the intervals are shorter. During the daytime, the intervals are a little bit longer. 11 places where you can change trains and change modes of transport from the train to the underground train. Some can change from the metro or underground to the tram or trolley bus or a bus. And if we look attentively in this slide, painted in blue are the existing routes, the existing core route, and additionally we have planned to introduce in the nearest future through the project a link between the left bank and the right bank of the river, and this is going to be the route along the old cargo route of Transsib, which ceased to be, and now this is a great prospect for revival and for development of urban environment in this zone. At the moment, this zone is not served by other modes of transportation. We cannot expect the underground transportation extended to this region, but the city realizes here very serious developments, like the extension of trams into this district, construction of new roads, improvement of pavements for those who prefer walking. And on the left you can see the territory, which is not developed yet, but in future it will be built, and the surplus of passenger ridership will be about 2 million passengers a year, which will be a very interesting move, because for the neighboring communities this will serve as the interception parking places, and where you can change for public transport like train, and within 20 minutes to find yourself in the center. Today these hubs can provide for faster travel time with great advantages for passengers. And of course passengers will appreciate this convenience, because when it takes just 15 to 20 minutes of travel by very convenient train, of course this is something that they will appreciate. Speaking about other developments, then the mayor of Novosibirsk, the administration of Novosibirsk, is implementing development of a number of such projects with the objective to ensure the long-term implementation and of plans that will incorporate all the routes required by the population. And in future, the improvement, the economic efficiency. The third point is introduction of a more convenient, seamless payment system, so that the passengers could always have an alternative way of paying for transport, and so that different modes of transport would compete for the passenger, but it would be a convenient system. And we will try in our plans to avoid duplication of different transport means on the same route. And if you ask the question, who will develop this infrastructure? Of course, the Russian Railways Company. We don't see any other alternative. But I would like to explain another opinion on this, because when we think about the concession as the legal agreement, then it is a timeless agreement. While Russian Railways Company builds the infrastructure and the city or the region introduces the tariffs, and if they are below the level of the costs covered, so then this gap is covered through the concession. And in Novosibirsk region, about 550 million rubles is subsidized to carriers a year, and not only carriers but also to some people who have the right to receive subsidies for transport. But the question is, who is in charge of the work of the system? So we have introduced already the transport card quite a substantial time ago, and this is the single express card. There are of course some barriers, and that's why I'm taking this chance and ask to eliminate this barrier. What I mean is the requirement of the federal legislation for passengers to carry personal identity, and the discount, entitlement to some discounts and subsidies. And we would like to offer such transport cards through the online portal Gosuslugi, which is the state services. So in this manner, the federal legislation is a barrier. It is excessive. We don't need it to be listed among the documents by which we should be guided in our requirements for the passengers. So the passengers would just, so that to simplify the way the passengers obtain these discounts. Thank you very much.
Я хотел бы...
Actually, dear colleagues, I wanted to ask a question to the audience. Are there questions to the panel participants? Because I think that if we have questions, no questions yet. Okay, perhaps we'll have some questions later. And now we have a surprise. So we prepared a vote related to 2030. It's not like something is right or wrong. These are questions for discussion. So all of you have your smartphones. So please scan the QR code from the screen and let's try to vote. We will only have 3 questions that will follow one another. For some reason I have it in English. Okay. So what will be the share of public transport in Moscow in 2030? And less than 50%. Everyone will use unmanned vehicles. It will remain the same. And now public transport has the share, I mean rail transport is about 70% in Moscow, or it will increase up to 90%. So let's vote. And question 2. How much time will the trip from home to work in Moscow take in 2030? First, from 1 hour to 2 hours, from 30 minutes to 1 hour, and thirdly, less than 30 minutes, and fourthly, everyone in Moscow will work from home in 2030. So please vote. Currently, according to statistics, the trip from home to work takes about 58 minutes average. And question 3, As you know, in Moscow, migration is quite large scale. Several million people migrate every day to Moscow and back on a daily basis, and half of them use buses or their privately owned cars. So what will be the share of rail transport in migration in 2030? First, 30%, secondly, 70%, or thirdly, 90%. Let's give it a second. And now please give us the results. So the rail transport will probably increase up to 90%. Brilliant, and I agree with that. The trip will take more or less like now from 33 minutes to 1 hour. So most of people present here think it won't change, but I think it will be less than 30 hours because it will be much higher speed. And the third question, about 70% will be the share. So people will still use their cars and buses a lot. But it seems to me that with more affordable and accessible railway transport, the share will be more than 70%, perhaps closer to 90%. But anyway, thank you very much for participating in this vote. And now I would like also to offer the floor for questions. No questions? Oh, we do have a question, yes. Please get the microphone. Mikhailova Nadezhda, Russian Railways. How will this future world that you described influence the cargo transportation inside city agglomerations, or what are the trends? Who should handle that question? Perhaps that would be for Mr. Toni. Any project related to the central hub or St. Petersburg hub, all of that projects are integrated. So in order to organize additional possibility for city train inside the city boundaries, you need to relocate cargo transportation, and that goes hand in hand. Similarly in Moscow, if Moscow Central Loop, so that loop that is inside the city is a purely passenger traffic, then developing the greater Moscow Loop is about developing cargo transportation which will bypass Moscow due to changed logistics. But anyway, these are integrated projects. It is clear that we pay attention to the right logistics and cargo transportation, and will launch container trains, and they will be faster. So for us, it is important to earn from all the elements, cargo, and of course the growth of passenger transportation. So that would be my answer. Thank you very much. Any other questions? If no questions, then I only have to thank all the participants of our panel for their presentations. I would like to thank the participants for their interest, and see you next year.